Different islands had different species of the same thing. The big one was the turtles, right? And then also we have finches that we haven't talked about. Okay? But he had these turtles. They were very similar, but they weren't the same. So he wondered, could these all have come from one turtle? That's what he was wondering. Okay? Did somehow these things develop or evolve from one turtle and they ended up on different islands? That was his big question that he wanted to answer. This is why he's a scientist. Okay? It's because he wanted to answer this question. So, okay, so who are the people? Who are the people that shaped his life? And I got them listed on your paper, I believe. Okay? I got them. These are the people that came up with the ideas. Okay? And what you need to know are this basic idea. Can somebody find out? So, the biggest thing here, this is not, you don't have to write these things down. To understand Darwin's radical thoughts, okay, you've got to understand where they were at this time. You have to understand that Darwin was out all by himself because at this time, everybody believed in the created God. Almost everybody. And so for him to suggest something different, he could have been burned at the stake as a heretic. Okay? You just didn't do that. Nowadays, you're almost burned at the stake in the media if you think of that in creation. Okay? So here it's just a 180. So for him to come up with this evolution idea, that was big, huge. Okay? Most people at that time, and remember Europe was the industrial age. Europe was the place where all science was happening. Europe was the place where we had the microscopes and all the studies of this. The United States really is just too infant here, because remember, we're talking about 1810, 1820. America is just barely getting to know who they are. Okay? All right? It's not there. So the world at this time, okay, believed that everything in the world existed for only a few thousand years. Okay? They thought that the earth was at the most 3,000 to 4,000 years old. That was it. Okay? That's what most people believed. Okay? So now, okay, he was suggesting an idea that said, well, maybe there's something other than creation. Maybe these things came to be outside of what creation really was. All right? And so hence we have the whole idea behind evolution. That evolution was happened because of geological features of individual plants and animals that are in these regions. And that this thing happened all of a sudden. Okay? All of a sudden, things came to be, and he just didn't understand that that could be true. He did not believe in this whole catastrophic idea. Okay? All right. So he began his study, and he needed a little bit of help. That's what this thing says here. Okay? So studying, and over some time, he was trying to formulate his ideas. Going back to his experience of his travel to Galapagos and around the world, he was trying to formulate all this. Okay? So now we get to these people. Okay? Hutton and Lyell. Hutton and Lyell. Okay? Now, these guys, at this point in time, were suggesting, okay, that maybe the Earth did not get formed all of a sudden. Just maybe, the Earth gained its features and its geological features and its form over not just thousands of years, but millions of years. This is Hutton and Lyell. And just maybe these geological forces, okay, were slowly developing. And they used some logic behind this. They studied volcanoes. They they studied the earthquakes, and they noticed that they didn't happen one after another. They happened over time. So if this earthquake forms this ditch, and you have and the last earthquake that they had in the history was this many years old, then they did the ratio. Well, then if it's this deep, it must have happened over this much time. So they used some deductive reasoning to form this. That was Hutton and Lyell. So Hutton believed that things changed geologically. Now, geo refers to what? Earth. So it's the logic of how Earth came to be. That was Hutton's big thing, okay? He said that the Earth was shaped, okay, very slowly. That was his big thing, Hutton. All right, so he is starting this whole idea that's anti-creation. All right? Now Lyell, okay, just restates this, sorry. Now Lyell, okay, Lyell's, he says, okay, well now there must be some set rules, some set principles by which we came to have the earth as we know it. Notice, they're not talking about living creatures yet. They're talking about the formation of the earth. Okay? Alright, so he came up with some principles, okay, called the principles of geology. What a great test question. Principles of Geology. Who wrote that book? Origin of Species. Who wrote that book? Okay? Those are good test questions that I would ask about people. Okay? Alright. He believed, okay, in the same thing. He believed that millions of years, okay, alright, that it continued on to where we are and that this will continue on forever. Okay? And so, everything that goes into forming the earth, whether it's by volcanic eruptions, by earthquake, by the movement of the plates, okay, by the forces of water, all of these things are add up, and they got to happen over millions of years because there's no way that this can just all of a sudden happen here, okay? And he states this in his book Principles of Geology. And here's Darwin's take of this then. Well, if this is true, if Hutton and Lyell's idea of the earth is true, then couldn't creatures change over time as well? Couldn't they develop the way that they are over millions of years? I wonder what the creatures looked like a million years ago on this earth, because I wonder what the earth looked like then. Okay, and so it kind of makes logical sense, doesn't it? According to reason, if you're going to reason this way. Okay, and so he used Hutton and Lyell's idea of Earth, the geology of the Earth. Then another scientist comes along, another scientist by the name of Lamarck. Now Lamarck's going to take a little bit different look at some things, and I think you have Lamarck on your paper too, right? Okay. Okay. Lamarck. Okay, he was from France. He was from France. Remember, Darwin was where? England. Okay? And so Europe is the science factory of the world right now. Okay? He looked at the living things on the earth. Okay? And he believed, and this is one of the key things here, he believed that everything today were descendants from other species earlier. Well, that would make sense, wouldn't it? Because aren't we descendants of our parents and of our grandparents and of our great-grandparents? Did anybody have great-grandparents still alive?
Yep.
Great grandparents?
I do.
Oh, okay. I mean, that's rare, but you can still have it. Okay? So it would make sense. I mean, just follow the whole idea behind some of the creatures that we have. They look like we could get these creatures descendants from other creatures. Okay? So this is what he reasoned. He reasoned that living things must have developed into what they are from past ancestry. Okay? And so why do we have these creatures today? Why are we on this earth today? Because we've adapted. We've been able to adapt. Because if we wouldn't have been able to adapt to the environment, what would have happened?
We would have died off.
Yeah, so it makes sense, doesn't it? That the reason why we don't live in the polar ice caps is because we probably wouldn't survive there. But there are some creatures that would survive, like the penguins or the polar bears. But other creatures couldn't survive. And we don't see polar bears in the Sahara Desert because they weren't able to adapt to that environment. You couldn't have a lot of hair and live there. Okay? You'd have to be able to live in the heat and maybe in the sand, deal with less water. So, you have some logic here. Okay? So, Lamarck had a theory. Okay? And Darwin latches onto this. Okay? Lamarck really felt that as time goes on, we're getting closer and closer and closer to perfection.
Far from that.
It's fucking close.
So if we're around for another million years, just think of what the human beings would be then, as far as perfection is compared to other ones. Oh my goodness sakes. Okay? Well, yeah, it does, doesn't it? It makes perfect sense logically. All right? Okay? But also we could find some holes in this, right? Okay? If you're talking athletes, wouldn't you say athletes today are better than athletes of old?
Yeah.
You probably would say that, except for there are some records in Olympics that still have not been broken.
Most of them have.
Most of them have, but some of them still aren't. So if it's been 200 years, why haven't we broken them? Okay? Yeah, and so you're just talking about there's gotta be reasons why.
White people in disguise.
Okay? All right. Second thing,
Should I have a number 2? Or?
no, this is not number 2. This is just still the first thing. Organisms change, and they continue to change. Okay? Now here's the part of evolution that Darwin latches onto, right here. That creatures, as they develop, they acquire features that help them to survive. So that first creature that walked out of the water and went on land had to get back in the water because he couldn't survive. And then maybe he was on land for a little bit longer, then went back in the water because he couldn't survive. And then maybe the third or fourth time, maybe the babies that they had got on land, they could stay longer. And then finally they found ways of trapping the air. And so then they developed lungs. So they could stay on land. Wouldn't have to go back in the water. And then finally those babies, okay, must have gotten rid of the gills. And so they couldn't even go back in the water. They would have drowned. And some of them did. And only the ones that stayed out of the water, they're the ones that developed lungs, and they had perfected that organ. That's his idea. Yeah.
So say that's why there are some types of tortoises in like the desert and stuff?
Yeah, exactly. They have learned to adapt because they've grown features to make them adaptable. Okay? So for some reason, here's a key thing here. What separates us from the monkeys? And even the gorillas
Opposable
is
thumb.
no
Keely, they
tail.
have opposable thumbs.
I know.
We are closer to the baboons because they don't have tail. They just have a butt. So we at one time, humans must have said, you know what?
Wait,
We don't
gorillas
need
have
that
a tail?
anymore.
They don't have a tail.
Okay?
So
No,
why
we
are
didn't
we
cut it
closer to
off.
baboons?
We just
They don't
didn't
have
need
a
it anymore. So the next thing that was born found
She
out
just
that it
said
could
no.
live without it, and slowly over time it got
Okay.
shorter and shorter and shorter till it wasn't there. We'll call that vestigial in a minute. Yes.
Why would
the animals that were in the water come out of the water?
Well, see, those are all questions that would have to be asked.
you could be eating and doing
Okay.
it.
But see, Lamarck would say this.
Like you could
Lamarck would say this. Maybe they saw food. There wasn't enough food, so maybe they saw food that they needed to get out of the water. And so they ran on land, grabbed it, went back in the water. Okay. Much like you would have alligators. Alligators that would grab their food and take it into the water to drown it, and then they would be able to eat it because they have bodies that could be able to flush out that water, okay, and stuff like this. They can't live all the time in water, but they can live a long time in water. Okay?
Wouldn't we be closer descendants to the people, to the
Alligators can
animals
kill you
that were
like 5
outside of the
different
water?
ways.
Shh. What's that?
Wouldn't it be like
alligators.
closer descendants to the things that were already outside of the water?
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is that they didn't feel that. No, you have to understand something. This is the most important thing in their thinking. This is what's so amazing, is that we talk about the geological features, but every single evolutionists say, we developed from creatures that were protozoan. That means we developed from creatures that were in the water, and we developed from people. Our ancestry goes back to the water. It does. Water animals do not come from land animals. So we came from water, and we went on land. And then from the land we flew, because we flapped our things because there was food up there. We couldn't, and turtles, what they did was they just stretched their necks farther, and every turtle after that had long necks.
Giraffes.
Okay? I'm serious. Okay? But see, the thing is that logically, does that not make sense? So you could see their argument there. Okay? You can see their argument. Yeah.
Just a description of that theory is like they suddenly grew lungs to adapt. Like, how would you be able to tell your body to suddenly grow flesh in that area? It's not possible.
And that's why they keep on searching for the missing links. Where is that organism that's half lung and half gills? We've got one. It's the salamander. It's born in the water, okay, and it comes on land, but it can go back in the water. It has gill slits and it has lungs, so it can live in both. And it lives in an environment where it can stay submerged and breathe there, but come up, because it feeds on insects. See, so logically it makes sense. That salamander, Sally! Aunt Sally! Like that?
I got it.
But Sally was a mander!
What's the derp?
Okay. What's that?
What's the derp part?
I don't know. Okay.
So
Maybe
sad.
that's the evolutionists going, durr.
Yeah.
But anyway, go ahead. The top, so there's a lot of people, they would say that the giraffes developed from antelope. Antelope. No, they're from the antelope family. And also, if you know, if the hyenas have the low back legs, high front legs. So you're talking about these animals. So when you're looking for structures, according to Lamarck's theory, you look for those structures that have all the same kind of structures. And so all those animals that have those structures, that's how we fit them together. So it makes perfect sense. Okay? All right, here we go.
Oh, I found you. It's really zoomed in.
So, here's an example. Here's an example that I mentioned here. Birds, they wanted to fly. So, their wings grew. And their wings grew feathers. But here's the problem with that. Makes sense, right?
Oh, sure.
Except for birds' wings are hollow. So how did they hollow them out? An evolution would say they had to hollow them out because they wouldn't be able to stay airborne.
So the chicken's got the short end of the stick.
But when you look at the anatomy of a bird, it follows no rules according to other animals. No rules whatsoever. You know, birds do not fly by waving their wings up and down.
Yeah.
They roll them. They roll them, and the reason they fly is because they trap the air in the hollow parts of their bones, and it makes them less pressure. And they squeeze them in their bodies to force the air out. That's how they fly. It's an amazing thing. Okay. Second one, very important thing. Darwin falls in love with this. And it's the idea of use versus disuse. Now, it makes sense, guys. If you're not going to use something, then it just goes away. You don't need it anymore. And so animals found out they didn't need gills anymore because they could walk on land. And the ones that couldn't develop lungs, they stayed in the water. And so you got rid of the gills. And so every organism after that had less and less and less slits until finally they were closed up and they never had any gills. Okay? So it would make sense. And this is use disuse. If you're not going to use it, you will get rid of it. It will go out of your genes. My problem with this is this. What does a dog need with its tail?
A bone.
Attention.
Wagging it.
No, but why does it need a tail? It doesn't use it to walk.
It
You
uses
cut them off,
it
they
uses
still walk.
to show emotion.
What's that? No. You're talking behavior. What does it need to survive? So why are there tails on dogs when some of the dogs don't need tails? A dog doesn't need a tail to survive. A monkey, I can understand it. Because it's got a curl run and uses it to propel itself. Dogs can't. You know what? It brings perfect things to English. It's the tale of two cities. Lights on. We finish this tomorrow. You guys got great questions.
We're gonna. Boogie! You're boring.